Welcome to the League of Legends Champion Spotlight, featuring Master Yi, the Wuju Bladesman.
Hey there nerds, Fino here. Let's talk about the newest bait banner, Musashi. She's a 5-star saber with a single target NP and a triple buster deck. She's also got some cool tricks, so let's take a look. Master Yi's first skill is 5th Force. This is her signature skill and it makes her cards hit twice at the expense of damage, including extra attacks but not her NP. 5th form is by far the strongest part of her kit, and it gives her a dramatic increase in damage, star gen, and NP gain. It comes with a damage increase that, at max level, offsets a lot of the initial damage penalty. For this reason, you'll want to max it first. I can't overstate how powerful this is. For some numbers, a thread by Rathalal found that with only 5th form, various Brave Chains can generate 30 stars and 72% meter. An Arts crit in this scenario is pretty much an instant NP, and her third skill can improve star gen. There is, of course, a downside. The nature of the skill means that if you miss a Brave Chain, its effectiveness drops dramatically. And as you know, Fate Grand Order isn't always the kindest game when it comes to RNG. There are a few band-aids for this which I'll get to later on, but let's keep things going. Skill 2 is Heavenly Eye. This gives Clutch Invuln Pearson a Buster Amp. Pretty straightforward. Pop it with your NP or with 5th Force and a Buster Brave Chain. Skill 3 is Emptiness. 1-turn invincibility, debuff cleanse, and a 3-turn increase to your star gen. Pretty solid. The most important application is avoiding NPs, but if you've got that covered, feel free to play around with the other two effects. Emptiness actually scales well into Epic of Remnant and Lost Belt when enemies start vomiting debuffs all over you. Something to keep in mind. And now we come to Musashi's Noble Phantasm. 6 paths, 5 rings. This is a single target Buster NP that purges buffs on hit, and comes with NP damage on overcharge. Against evading or invulnerable enemies, you'll want to pair this with Heavenly Eye. That might sound a bit wasteful, but this actually does damage, so using it to just purge is a much bigger waste. If you happen to fight Ku or Ku Alter, this is gonna shit all over them. Taking all this into account, we get a picture of Musashi as a servant geared towards massive burst turns. She obliterates enemies when her cooldowns are up and her cards align, but stands there awkwardly when that isn't the case. To an extent, that's the case for every attacker, but Musashi takes it to another level. To play around this feature, I've assembled a few sample teams for your consideration. Firstly, we have this modest setup for my free-to-play friends. Just roll a Merlin, dude. It's not hard. Musashi has a grand total of 1 Arts card and 1 Quick card. While these can generate a lot of resources in combination with crits or 5th Force, you don't want to sit there waiting for them. By getting charge, damage, and crit stars from servants like Waver with 2030 or Merlin, she can hold her cooldowns for those apocalyptic burst turns. Like if you get a Buster Brave Chain with hero creation, oh man. That said, this setup doubles down on Musashi's strengths, but also her weaknesses. When you don't have a Musashi Brave Chain, you're really just sitting there watching awkwardly as Waver and Merlin jerk each other off. They get to play a rousing game of Arts Chain volleyball. Next up, we have a solo setup. While George and Leonidas are my standard picks, any servant can work if you draft them into the taunt war with Guda Guda Poster Girl. So hear me out. Musashi relies heavily on Brave Chains, but you've got all these pesky allies pissing in your soup. What do? Kill your friends. Turns out a deck of 5 cards is a lot more consistent than a deck of 15. Essentially, you just get Musashi alone with your opponent and just go to town. Because she has a Berserker deck, she can just Buster Brave Chain her way to victory. Fergus can technically do the same thing, but Musashi has a much more aggressive kit that lets her burn down enemies quickly. Between Emptiness and your Mystic Code, you get 2 turns of safe DPS. Depending on the matchup, you can even tech in Volume in her Dredgerum for an extra turn of security. And finally, we've got the Big G's. What if I told you there was a way to get consecutive Musashi Brave Chains while keeping your friends? With a little help from Bonzi Buddy, it's possible. Summer BB's third skill locks your command cards for 3 turns. If you pop those with a Musashi Brave Chain, that's 3 turns of 2 swords, 1 cup violence. The big benefit of this over the solo setup is that you have the advantages of 2 supports without dealing with their command cards. BB has star income on her third skill, and Merlin has it on Garden of Avalon. If you have 2030 on them, even better. Merlin gives you an out to both enemy NPs and random damage, and BB can actually wave clear, which in combination with Arash means you can skip waves 1 and 2 in most encounters. This saves you a lot of awkward brawling. Now I hinted at this before, but getting Musashi's cooldowns to align with a Brave Chain is the biggest struggle with her. Doing it once is easy enough, but doing it repeatedly and with a full team can get very frustrating. With careful use of BB's Faceless Moon, you can get around this to a large degree. Say you pull a Brave Chain on turn 1, Musashi pops her cooldowns and goes to town. Now you have a minimum of 5 turns until you can do it again, because cooldowns include the turn you activate them. I mean, unless you want to run Tamamu in a Buster team. That's all you. The odds of you getting a Brave Chain on turn 6 aren't great, but let's say you pull one on turns 4 or 5. Your cooldowns aren't up, but you can lock that hand with Faceless Moon so it'll be up on turn 6. If you don't draw a Brave Chain at all, then you're screwed. But BB substantially reduces the luck required to make Musashi really shine. The best part is that Faceless Moon also has a 6-turn cooldown, so you can do this repeatedly assuming no one dies. We won't get Summer BB until the 3rd summer event, but if you're a Musashi fanboy then it might be worth saving up in advance. Or, just luck sack a pair. Easy peasy, right? Except for the solo team, these have all been premium setups. Sorry to say your girlfriend's got expensive tastes. Musashi's kit is such that she works substantially better with high-end supports than with budget options. I mean, yeah, you can use her as a generic beatstick in a brawling setup, but you've got cheaper options for that. For craft essences, you have a large selection. Limited Zero Over and Golden Sumo are the most generally useful, with the latter being a persistent attack buff to exploit with 5th Force. Strangely enough, Black Rail is viable since she can generate substantial meter with 5th Force and an arts crit. Then there's the Star Absorb option, which is nicer for support combos. Steel Designation Enforcer and Dababuha Matubasu are strong options on this front, with the latter increasing crit damage as well. For Mystic Codes, try these on for size. The Mages Association uniform lets you redraw and fish for Brave Chains. This one's a funny, if somewhat extreme option to pair with a Summer BB. The Atlas Academy uniform is geared towards soloing, and you can use it to get a second invulnerability and a debuff cleanse. Finally, we have Fragment of 2004, which is by far the most aggressive option. NP damage, Star Absorb on a Buster cards, and NP generation are all things that Musashi wants. It lets you set up and squeeze out every last bit of damage from your Musashi turns. Musashi is a decent servant, but she has notable flaws. Despite being a woman, she has a massive refractory period. 5th Force? Very powerful. You can save it for a big turn or use it with an arts card to rapidly build NP, and its cooldown is fairly short. But her dependence on this skill means she's beholden to Brave Chains to an extreme degree. She's paradoxically flexible, but also very limited. 5th Force might come up, but you're stuck waiting for the perfect hand, or really just any hand with 3 Musashi cards. This gives her a love-hate relationship with supports, and while you might try and get around this with caveman strats, a 3-threat Buster team, that playstyle gets a lot less effective in Epic of Remnant. Musashi Double Merlin gives you comical damage turns, but juggling her cards and cooldowns on top of the new gauge mechanic means you're going to have serious consistency problems. I'd argue that once Skydie comes out, Okita will become a more practical beatstick. She'll have devastating single-target turns without the need for external star gen or careful NP generation, something to keep in mind if you're playing for power. When Musashi came out on JP, I immediately identified her as a bait character. You look at her and think, yeah, she's cute and that kit's pretty cool, so sure, why not? And then pow! You get sucker punched with King Hassan. Mind you, I didn't know King Hassan was coming at the time, but it's kind of a pattern. Anytime they trot out Skahaku a new face, they tend to follow it up with something you really want, so you have to buy more quartz. Not so relevant on NA since we know the servant list years in advance, but just a bit of perspective on why I call Musashi bait. In the end, Musashi may not have convinced me to roll for her, but I have a sudden urge to play League of Legends. And that's all I've got. If you enjoyed this video, by all means like, subscribe, and come watch me on Twitch. I stream every weekend, so if you want to shoot the shit, that's the place. Alright, see you next time.